Welcome, beautiful birds, and blessings to many beings. I've got a special guest on today's podcast, and welcome to another episode on the Divine Discoveries podcast, where we go deep, we discover deeper parts of ourselves that really feel called to the surface. So today is very exciting. I have Harrison Meagher on the podcast, and I did a little bit of research, and I've learned that he is a spiritual love coach and leads from the heart, and is a wonderful warrior that really inspires others to come from a heart space. And it is so exciting because in my journey, love is like the biggest thing that I am learning to be and embody. So we're going to learn so much from Harrison, and it's going to be a really great time. So I'm excited.
I'm so excited to be here with you, Paul. I can feel the excitement, and I'm sure we'll get into this in many ways today. But yeah, it
Yes.
is it is that excitement that really cultivates this love energy. So I'm all yours. Let's do this.
Beautiful. I have so many questions that my heart is ready to ask. My first question, just to understand where you came from, what
Mm,
led you to being a spiritual love coach and to
mm,
being in the heart? Like, how did your journey, your upbringing begin?
mm. Well, I guess the first thing I'll say is that I don't think I had a choice. Right? The more that I've sort of pulled back the layers that have helped me to do what I do now in the world, I've realized, oh, there's something else going on here. There's something else that is directing me and pushing me forward. And oh, lost it. Oh, there you go. And so that that spirit, if you want to call it that, has been directing my life. So it was never really. I'm surrendering more and more to that. I refer to it as divine will. But in
Yes.
terms of how it all started, without going too deeply into all of the little bits and pieces, I grew up as a little boy that suppressed a lot of his innate divine feminine sensitivities, his magical abilities.
Mm,
I was told that boys shouldn't cry, that men should not express their feminine nature. So I pushed it down. I fast forward to my teenage years. I spent a lot of my time wandering around looking for external validation through women, through drugs, through travel, through sex, and all the things.
mm,
And then in my mid 20s, I had a come to love, come to God, come to source moment where I had the choice to, where everything was taken away from me very abruptly.
mm,
And I had to go within. I had to go within to see what my truth actually was. And
mm.
that led me to where I am today.
Ooh, feels like a spiritual adventure from coming from a space of being dragged out of there and just it's a lot of, especially I experienced that a lot growing up where it's like they coming from a feminine perspective, like I felt like I was the one that didn't feel like I had to cry, like I had to just be strong. And the role models I had were very much strong people. They didn't talk about their feelings.
Yeah.
So it was such like a river that was like shut closed. And
Yeah.
like what happens when all those emotions are really closed? They explode and they turn into like different, like my
Disease.
thing, disease.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
Like it showed up in different areas of like my eating habits, like the way I looked at myself, the way I related with other people, and it like destroyed me. And for the longest time, it's like what,
Can
like
I
yeah,
can I
it
share
was
a
crazy.
story connected to what you're saying
Absolutely,
that,
let's do it.
highlights beautifully what you're talking about, this
Ah,
suppression of the emotional energy and what it leads to, right?
let's
Had the
go.
pleasure, had the gift of writing and releasing my first book this year, and I
I know. I
wrote
see.
it. Yeah, it's beautiful. Maybe we can talk about it later. But in the book, I described a story I had with a client,
Oh,
and she had an eating disorder, and she had an eating challenge, and she was very overweight. And we were starting the conversation, and I was tuning into her, and I asked her very simply, when did you first start to notice the weight starting to be packed on, or this challenge with food starting
mm,
to be, where did it originate? And she shared with me that she noticed it at the time when her daughter passed away, when her daughter left this world. And I sort of digged into that, and I asked her, okay, so with your permission, can you explain to me when this beautiful being in your world transitioned, how did it make you feel? And she replied without any hesitation. She said, empty. It made me feel empty. And so I asked
Right.
her, right? I always get goosebumps when I tell this story because it's so could not be more perfect in terms of the highlighting of this. I asked her, do you think this has a relationship to the food that you are choosing to place in that emptiness? And she
Yes.
said yes, very deeply. So, I shared that story to show you, to highlight what you're saying, right? The physical body and our physical desires will be the last place an energetic, emotional, spiritual imbalance will show up. And it doesn't show up in that way because it's punishing us. It's showing up in that way because it's like, hey, look at me. We need to come back to balance.
Oof. I'm gonna let that settle for just a second,
Yeah.
because that explains like the on and off again like eating habits I've had in my past, and now it's like I'm finally waking up to it, like what it's done, and it runs in the family as well. It's not just me, and I've seen it how like there's a lot of emotional suppression I've noticed in the patterns of my family, and how that like in my family we're known for like big bone beautiful women and just like people that are proud of like who we are. And at the same time I'm like, what's underneath that? Because I get very curious and I ask deeper questions, and I see a lot of people not talking about their feelings. Like they're very,
Yeah.
and I had a beautiful conversation with my brother. I'm like, we're very independent, and I see that as like a pro and con in quotation marks, because it's like it's a great pro to understand that we can sustain ourselves and we can give ourselves that love. But
Yeah.
it's like I've noticed the tendency I've had is I don't seek that external help. So whenever I don't have that help externally, it becomes a con of being
Yeah.
overly independent
Yeah.
and not being able to share the feelings I have, and like unleash that to people that really need to hold space for me,
Yeah.
or not need to, but that get the privilege to hold space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, this is beautiful. All right. Is there any more on that topic that feels like it needs to be shared? I feel like that can go down a rabbit hole. But you're very true. Like when it comes to like the body was seeking to be filled with not just like the people around me giving me the good energy. It's just like I felt empty in the past, and
Yeah.
that was the best way that I knew how to fill that space.
Yeah. And Paula, I'll say one more thing to this, right?
Of
And
course.
the story that I shared highlights what you're saying, but it also highlights something else that I really want people to listen into and open
Beautiful.
to is when I created that space for that lady to have that introspection, to ask that deeper question, she also replied to me that that was one of the first times she'd done that. She'd actually
Wow.
asked herself what was going on. She actually tuned in to her inner knowing, her inner wisdom, her inner loving guidance, and asked, okay, what is the need that needs to be met here? Is the need
Yes.
the food? Is the need the cake, the sugar, the donut, whatever it is? Or is the need something more emotionally expressive? And I share that because most of us, myself included, for a very long time, we're outsourcing our power, right? We're outsourcing our knowledge, right? And as you just beautifully highlighted, there is a time and a place for that. Like we do need other people to guide us home to our light, but we're not using it in that way. We're using outside sources as our light, right? We're using
Yes.
outside sources as the power source, and then we come second.
Man. There's a question here. I can feel it. For our viewers, what would be a healthy balance or moderation for being able to discern that for themselves? Because I feel like there's a lot of people out there that's lost and they don't know
Good question.
what's the best way for them to really know when
Find
is a
that
good
voice.
place. Yeah, find
Yeah.
the voice.
Well, this is probably going to be hard for people to hear, but the first step is getting quiet, right?
Ooh,
Creating I'm a big fan of daily habits, right? Your daily habits create your week, create your month, create your year, right? You are a symptom of the habits you decide to implement, right? So when you ask me the question, how does one start to connect to their inner knowing, their inner power, their inner intuition, whatever you want to call it, it begins by making the choice to create an intentional practice to cultivate that voice. Right?
Mm,
Because let me be very clear for every single person watching or listening, that voice is there. It's not a matter of having to obtain it or gain it or, you know, read a book and then you have it. No, it's there. It's speaking to you. But the problem is, as I just highlighted earlier, you're not listening. So
mm,
we need to create a practice daily to cultivate the space needed for that voice to be heard. Okay. For me, just to get super practical, this looks like meditation, right? I had the divine pleasure to start this podcast to in facilitating a little meditation to ground into that. Why did we do that? We did that
mm,
so our inner voice could come through, right? But that's not the only thing, right? There's breath work. I connect to nature, right? I I do sun gazing, right? These are all all practices that have this same thread of allowing the divine within me to come up. But it begins by making the choice to implement those habits.
ooh. Choice has been a big word. I've been seeing a lot of twos, and twos definitely symbolize the choices, the balance, the what can you do in pairs, as well as knowing that the decisions you make have an impact on yourself and others. So it's so important for people to really realize that we have a choice in everything. And I want to emphasize that because back then, I believe the world was against me. And that's what like brought up a lot of spite and towards like the rebel, the one who like always wanted to start fires and just like burn down bridges. And yeah, she came from such a fury place. And I
Yeah.
believed back then I didn't have a choice. So I want to emphasize that to really inspire others
Huge.
to be conscious about their choices,
Yeah.
because one can get lost in their circumstances and think that they're not, like, they have no choice in their life. And
Yes.
that's where I was. It was tough.
Paula, I want to honor you for really acknowledging that because
Yes.
you're not alone, right? And you said, the warrior. Another name I would add to this archetype is the victim, right? If
Ooh.
especially, right? Yeah, it's a big one, right? I was there, right? Another part of my story growing up, I was, trigger warning here for anyone that's listening, but I was sexually abused, right, as a teenager. And I held that victim label. I held the label that this didn't happen, this happened to me, right? And I perpetuated that label mask, that victim mask, because it got me attention, right? It brought
Yeah.
me energy through the people that facilitated and gave me their their love based off the experiences that I went through. And I am by no means overlooking the very real event of the abuse and the responsibility that the perpetrator needs to step into. But what we have to remember is that when we are in the victim mask, that too is us giving away our power, right? That
Yes.
too is us saying unconsciously that I cannot change unless the outside world changes first.
Ah, so divine. Thank you so much for sharing that like very vulnerable experience that you went through. And ah, it back then, like I went through very similar experiences, and that victim mentality, like I'm still like going beneath the layers and seeing where it shows up very subtly. And it's incredible to see how many layers it has, from like one experience that people had, or like many experiences that they fell through different cycles that, in my past, that I wasn't aware of. There was many cycles of that abuse, and I kept thinking like, I'm a victim. Let me go ahead and tell people my story. And I'm like, man, now it's like, how can I break that shit down? I love swearing, so I'm gonna go ahead and say it freely. So yes, I was like, how can I break that shit down and be able to know that this is only one side of the story? Because There's something that one of my coaches actually told us. It was, I think, the victim, the reporter, and the expertise or the expert. And it's like from the victim, you can see the different things that, that's not serving you, that it's like a whole story that's like compiled into that. And as well as the expert, like you learn, you're on the other side of the coin. And the reporter is the one in the middle, being able to see both sides and witness the scales essentially. So it's like it's only one part of the story. You gotta have the, like you said, the stillness to be able to witness the other side of the story and change that narrative.
And I'm going to sprinkle in one more word here.
Yes.
So not just stillness, because stillness is the foundation, right? You asked me, how do we start to cultivate that inner power for change, right?
Yeah.
Stillness, step number one. But step number two, once we're in that stillness, for most of us, me included, when we're in that stillness, especially if we've been through traumatic events, stuff's going to come up, right? Shadows are going to come up. Pain is going to come up. Unprocessed stories are going to come up. The victim mask is going to come up. So, what do we do in that situation? This is where the heart space and love comes in. You sprinkle in your divine love. So, and maybe we'll get to that in a bit, but that's step two.
Oh man, I'm so ready. Okay. The next question is, for the more mundane mindseted beings that don't really get divine love, how would you put it in a practical means or translate that for those that don't know what that is?
Yeah. I'll be super simple with it. Love is not an emotion. Love is not a feeling. Love is a frequency and consciousness state that we can unlock deeper layers of along our spiritual path, right? That's probably the simplest way I could describe what spiritual or divine love is. So, with that understanding, the next question is, okay, so how do I unlock those layers? How do I go into that deeper divine love? Well, as Rumi likes to say, the wound is where the light enters you, right? So if you're looking to bring more divine love into your life, the first place to begin is look at the thing that is most painful for you, right? So I'll use me as an example. Alchemizing my sexual abuse and trauma was one of the ways that more divine love came into my life, right? I very recently went through a heartbreak in a relationship that transitioned and changed very unexpectedly. I expanded into deeper layers of divine love by adding grace and starting to soothe and heal the parts of me that came up within that rejection and abandonment.
Oh man, so many pieces here I want to touch on. I know there's a lot of people that really, in quotation marks, suffer from the levels of abandonment. I know very well, like I went through that a lot, where it's like after at a young age my parents passed and I felt like I was abandoned by the world in that circumstances. And I know a lot of people that will listen to this will resonate with that too. So what would you recommend as like some pointers or some questions to really ask themselves deeper of what is underneath the
Yeah.
betrayal, the abandonment, and all those like shadows? I love those
Yeah.
realms. So I'm ready.
Yeah. So this is probably one of my favorite questions because it's so once you understand this, it changes everything in your life. And so in the work that I do as a mentor and coach, I work with a certain set of tools, if you want to call them that, or I have a medicine bag full of certain practices that I implement when the time is needed, right? So when someone comes to me
Beautiful.
with this example that you're saying, with abandonment and rejection wounds coming up, maybe from a recent relationship ending,
Hmm.
what I apply to this situation is reacquainting oneself with the inner child, right? With your beautiful inner child. And for people that are new to that, or maybe have heard it before and are still very unfamiliar with it, the inner child is the piece of you, the piece of your consciousness that holds that childlike essence. And at a very deep level, that childlike essence is pure. It is radiant. It has adventure. It has play. It has pleasure. It has joy. But unfortunately, most of us have grown up in families, in cultures, in religions, in cultures, in other types of cultures that have programmed that inner child with a lot of layers of emotional suppression, like I talked about earlier, or limiting beliefs that now that inner child is carrying. And where is it carrying it into? It is that inner child is carrying all of that baggage into our adult relationships. So, what I'm getting at here is your adult abandonment, your adult rejection. It does not originate in that adult relationship. It originates 99% of the time within an inner child shadow that needs to be loved.
Ooh, I love this. I love the inner child work. It's something I'm getting into and getting familiar with as well. And like you said, like a lot of it really stems from it because it's like I feel like a lot of us really go through different programmings when like we're younger, and there is the ones who grew up in dysfunctional families, the ones whose like parents passed away, those who were just like not provided the needs that they needed as a child. Like I've noticed how much it shows up as an adult, where it's like we seek externally, where we can be needy in quotation marks, or we can just be like so giving away our power and searching for it externally instead of being like, okay, this is what I need for myself today. Like I truly believe self love is the best medicine, and that's one of the one of my life purposes is to be in such a place of self-love where it pours out of me and to be able to reach other people. And I notice the practices whenever I fall away from that, from the daily habits, it's like, okay, where do I have to return to myself? So for those listening, what would you suggest is the most important practice for self love? Like, how can they remind themselves constantly, or what affirmations can they feed themselves with, or people they surround themselves with? Like, what is a
Yeah.
good post for
Yeah.
them?
Yeah. So I'll pull out. You said affirmation, and I'll
Mm,
share an affirmation that I use with clients, and I use myself every night before I go to bed. And
beautiful.
there's a lot more to it. It's a big long affirmation, but I'm gonna pull out the last sentence, okay? Because it's probably the most powerful piece of the affirmation, and it's very simple. It is you place your hands on your heart and you express, "I am all that I am. I am all that I am. I am all that I am." And that affirmation is very profound because, in the deepest of layers, what it is saying is bringing acknowledgement to the loving presence that you are, right? Because you are a presence of love, starting to remember that the love that it's made of is unconditional. But if we, as I said earlier, if we are a consciousness of love, we're not conditional love, we're unconditional love. So when you repeat the affirmation, "I am all that I am," you are you are affirming that consciousness state that you are made of. And let's say throughout the day that you've had some shadows come up, you've had some wounds come up, you've had some triggers take you away. What that affirmation does is it now acts as a soothing remedy to again remind yourself that you deserve to be loved, not just in the moments where you feel expansive and joyful and happy, but you also deserve to be loved in the moments where you feel angry, where you feel disconnected, where you feel triggered, where you feel wounded, where you feel deeply in grief, in sad. You deserve just as much love in those states as you do in the other states. And that affirmation really supports with that.
Ooh, I love that so much. Yes, and So many points. Because once I started my shadow work journey, I've noticed that that is really the key, loving all the different parts of ourselves that we sometimes shun. And I'm always screaming into the void about that to those people where it's like, love the darkness, love the part of yourself that you've really like just suppressed, because that's where the gold really lives. It's so beautiful because I pulled the rebirth card, and the card I had was the kitsuge. You know, like the Japanese art where it's
Yep.
like yes.
Yep.
So it's like the gold that pours through the cracks, essentially. It's like what seeps in through the cracks. It's the wounds, like you said earlier, where it's
Yeah.
just it's filled. We can find gold in those cracks, and it is such a privilege and a blessing.
And look, can I add something to this? Right,
Yes.
we don't just find the gold in the cracks, and I think we've done a really good job in this conversation thus far, really highlighting that our pain is what helps us awaken to deeper states. Right, that we understand, but
Yes.
I just want to also plant this seed from a spiritual lens. The soul that we are came to this earth school to experience life, to experience how I would describe it, God experiencing God, or love experiencing love, or the divine that you are experiencing the divine that I am, right? But so if we can understand that, then we can take the next logical step and really break it down to see that if God or love is here to experience everything, it's also here to experience that pain. That's also here to experience that shadow. It's also here to experience that heartbreak, that trauma, that, anxious moment. So it's not, and I share this because sometimes we we do the healing for the sake of doing the healing, right? We just like we get lost
Mm.
in the doing of the 3D things in our work, we can also get lost in the I need to heal for the sake of healing, or I'm not enough. I need to heal my inner child because if I don't get to that ethereal destination in the future. And it's not about that. It's not about getting to any destination. It's about being fully present. And one of the ways
Yes.
that we can come back to this present is to acknowledge that by you experiencing the pain, that is part of your purpose for being.
Oof. There's so much resonance. Because just last year, that was me. That was me in the sense of like, oh, I have to heal just to heal. And like last year, I got out of a really learning and experienced relationship where I gained so much wisdom from. And I had this mindset where it's just like, okay, I was broken. Now it's time to remend myself. And in a sense, yes. But at the same time, it's like I had to allow myself to be in those grungy moments where it's just like the inner goblin in a sense where it's like, I don't want people to see me. I just want to crawl in a hole and just and I didn't give myself the luxury to do those things because I felt like I have to step up. I have to like be the person I came here to be. I have to lead. But what I wasn't understanding was I had to let myself just be. And I feel like
Yes.
there are many times when those on the spiritual journey, like you said, where we just get lost. And it's like a rabbit hole within a rabbit hole. We have to just take the rabbit hole away and just like lay on the grass. And it took me some time to really realize that. And now I feel like I'm finally implementing the stages of it's just time to be. And the universe just keeps like shouting from the hills. It's like just remember to be joyful, be loving, be like just enjoy the emotions that like the full rainbow of emotions that you get to experience, even if it's crunchy. Oh, you're on
Yeah.
mute.
Let me unmute.
Okay,
Yeah,
there we
all
go.
good. I got so excited I muted myself. I need to just highlight something so important here with what you're saying with just the being, right?
Yes.
We have an illusion, right? And I my theory is that it comes from what we spoke about earlier of being indoctrinated that our power is outside of us, right?
Yes.
For me, this illusion came from growing up in a religious culture that told me that my God, my higher power, is a man on a cloud outside of me, right? So I need to do all the things, click all the boxes, and then I have my purpose and my passion. But I
Yes.
just want to revert this here and go with what you're saying. We, because of that limiting belief, we have gotten lost in the illusion that our purpose, our passion, our the thing that we're here to do will come to us once we do the thing, right? We have to follow the steps. I need to do the things to get into alignment, and then
Mm,
my passion, the gates will unlock, and I'll see the thing that I'm meant to be doing. And
mm,
it's the reverse. Your passion, your purpose, your, I refer to it, your love frequency that you're here to share comes from it's a symptom of you reconnecting to your beingness, reconnecting to your presence, right? Another way to describe this that I like to highlight is there's two parts to purpose, passion, and fulfillment. The first part is cultivating your connection back to your divinity, your beingness, your essence. Then, once you're in that beingness, what's most likely going to happen? You're going to feel inspired. Your cup is going to fill up so much with your beingness that you will not be able to not step back out into the world, because you'll feel so inspired. And it's in that moment, stage 2 of your purpose kicks in, where you start to share your beingness in your unique way with the outside world. And that's the purpose there.
I love that. And I've noticed that I did a little digging in like human design as well as like gene keys, and I fully understand that the space we're meant to come from, maybe not everyone, but at least like those that really lead from a place of like passion, pleasure, and purpose, we really get to like focus on where that stems from us, where our focus is on like the passion that we feel. And it's so important to remember that comparison was underneath that for me. So from me wanting to lead from a place from purpose, I had to let go of comparison because that was a big part of blocking me from the blessings that really, it's like, oh, this person is doing this person's doing paintings, or they're doing that. Like, how can I do something similar to that? And me realizing that that's not how the blessings really coming in from like copying or just stemming from seeing what others are doing. It's like, what can I do and how can I translate to that, to how I want to do things? Like, forget the manual, forget like the rules that we were born into, and really remember that we get to make our own rules. And I love that because it's like when we get to fill our cups, it's like we forget that there's even a rule in place. We don't know like what's the word, structure. We forget the structure. We create our own like foundation
Yeah.
from, yeah, that just
Yeah.
flowed through so beautifully. So yeah, I feel like it's important to take the blinders off, be aware, and at the same time that we get to open our peripheral
Yeah.
to what's available for us in each
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll add a little reframe for the comparison that you talked about that we all get stuck
Yes.
in, because you're spot on, right?
Yeah.
We deplete our inspiration and motivation when we compare ourselves to the perceived journey that someone else is taking, right? And I say
Yeah.
perceived because we can never understand their state of consciousness. We only ever view them through our state of consciousness, right? That's very important for people to see. We're creating our world through our internal lens, right? We only see what our current state of consciousness allows us to be, right? So I look at you and I create a story based off what I perceive you to be doing. And the likelihood that that story is actually you is very little, is very small, because you're in your own
Yeah.
state of consciousness. But I just, the reframe here with the comparison is, instead of seeing them as at a place that maybe you're not at or you can't get to, what you can start to understand from the deepest spiritual level, right? We are all born from the same source, right? We all have divinity inside of us. We all have, and I want everyone to hear this, the access to unbounded, unlimited potential. So what we can do as a reframe is let's use Paula as an example. When I see Paula standing in her light, doing her unique expression, and all this abundance coming in, instead of me standing in the, I don't have any of those things. I'm not enough in Paula's light. What I can do is see the truth and see that if Paula is standing in that potential and unlocking her potential in her unique ways, I can celebrate her because I know that if she has been able to unlock that potential, then there is no reason that I can't unlock that same potential to then express it in my unique way. So, in that act of celebration, I'm not just affirming you and celebrating you in your love, I'm also affirming me and my potential to step into that same unbounded energy.
That's essentially unconditional love. Being able
Yeah.
to love the light that one brings, that they realize what is already within themselves.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I feel
all
another
these all
question.
these love practices, they're so, I'll just share this it's so when we see love as an emotion and a feeling, we overlook these practices, right? They're just an emotional loving thing to do. Yeah, I get it, but I won't worry about it. But if we shift it to the consciousness of love, like I spoke about earlier, we now see the power of that loving action and that loving habit that I just described, right? You
Yes.
feel it in your heart.
The question that has been on my mind and may have answered it, but just to go a little bit deeper in it, is how does one lead from love? Like,
Yeah.
that's the only words that come up for me. How does
Yeah,
one
yeah.
lead from love?
Well, many of the practices we've talked about today would be a way to implement that, but let's answer it from another angle. You you lead from love by choosing in every moment love over fear, right? And let me break down what I mean by that. In my day, right, as my business grows, I'm noticing that there are more and more opportunities for me to be taken away by limiting beliefs, unconscious stories and emotions that I'm still yet to heal. And in each of those moments, if I was to get really simple, whether it's anger, whether it's a limiting belief of not enoughness, whether it's, an old story of rejection or my voice doesn't matter, whatever the superficial layer of the resistance is, if I was to summarize them all down into one energy, it's fear, right? All resistance, all these types of trauma and pain, they all boil down to fear. So there's only ever two choices we can make in life. We're either making a choice, consciously or unconsciously, to let that fear be our reality, i.e., I am that limiting belief, i.e., I am that guilt and shame, i.e., I am that abandonment wound or rejection wound, or in that moment that the pain comes up, I can decide to choose love. I can decide to drop into my heart and move forward from there. Okay, and practically, what does this look like? I'll share another affirmation. An affirmation that I use daily in each of these moments is I place my hands on my heart and I ask, when that fear is moving through me, what would love do? What would love do in this situation? Right. And I want to just give a very I did this right before this call. Right before I got on this podcast, I did this very practice. Right. I had a message come through from a friend, and we're talking about this beautiful collaboration. And some things were shared, and in the message I noticed within me there was some fear coming up. There was some fear, there was some separation, there was some judgment, there was some shame coming up. And I had a choice in that moment before coming onto this podcast to either become that fear and that shame and that judgment in that moment, let it be in me, let it just move through me, or choose love. So I placed my hand on my heart. I asked, what would love do? And what I was guided to do was send a voice message to that person, affirming their beautiful question, affirming their beautiful work in the world, and but also expressing my loving truth to help me channel the emotion out of me. So, I highlight that very specific example to me to show everyone that this is something we can all do in each moment. We either are choosing to let the fear overcome us, or we're choosing love and alchemizing that and stepping forward.
Ooh, beautiful. Oh my gosh. One question stemming from that: what are good practices to come from instead of fear into love? Because that is something that I am learning and leaning into. I'm like, what practices can I do to help me reframe fear into love? Like, I love practicality. I'm here
Yep.
to learn more of like
Yeah.
the strategic steps. So
Yep. Let's do more. Okay. So, other
beautiful.
than that affirmation, right? Other than that, because that's a big one, right? That's one we can do like so many times throughout a day. Other than that, one of the other big practices that I do personally and when I teach clients is an energy cleanse. We should
Ah,
all be energetically cleansing at least daily, if not multiple times a day. And what I mean by this is the the limiting beliefs that we have that take us away, right? I.e., I'm not enough, I'm not creative, I don't deserve to express my voice, right? Just some examples. Those most likely did not originate from you, right? We talked about earlier the inner child, right? We talked about how the inner child is programmed by its culture, its family, its religion, its government that it's in, right? So what this shows is that on a daily basis, there is so much negative, limiting thought forms, emotions projecting onto us. So if we are not consciously going into our being and cleansing ourselves of the cords that are attaching themselves to us daily, then this builds up, right? This builds up and creates a person that is constantly being taken away by fear, being constantly taken away by these illusions and limitations. So, a practice that I implement daily is an energy cleanse, right? A very simple way to describe it is using your breath and tuning into each chakra and energy center, breathing in love, breathing in light, and releasing everything that's not serving you, right? There's many other derivations of it that I teach, but that's where I would begin.
beautiful. Ah, I wanted to really like sprinkle on some more ideas of like energetic cleansing because when I a year ago I was looking into that because I've noticed a lot of like my energy draining. And I was like, why is this happening? Like, why am I more tired than usual when I'm around certain people? And it wasn't clicking back then. It took some time for me to really realize that the people around me were just like energy vampires. So I was like, okay, what can I do to pour energy back into myself and be able to be the source of love and just be a source of, okay, my word back then was positivity. But now I realize it's just the how do I pour love back into myself to be just to be me. And I had to really dissect every little thing I was doing. I love that being able to look beneath the layers and flipping through the pages of what I did. So the practices that most served me was playing music,
Yeah,
dancing, just allowing yourself to be taken by the little things that fill you with so much joy.
yeah,
And once I realized that those little things, whatever it can be like reading a book on a good day, being outside on a beautiful windy day. I love working with the element of air, and I'm actually an air sign. So I'd say if you're very much into astrology, look to different ways within your astrological chart to see what element that really this is some really good things just for deeper practices. Um, Look at your element and look what element it could be. Earth is telling you to ground in nature. Water is telling you to go out to the sea or the ocean or lake. And fire just means having a nice fire and connecting with that element. I feel like I need to talk more about the elemental practices, and
Yeah.
I'm
Can I
slowly
can
opening
I
up
add
those
one?
doors.
Can I
Yes, go
add one
ahead.
to
Let's
the
do it.
elemental practice? Because,
Yes.
this is so important what you're hitting on. But this is another love practice that I share with
Yes.
people, and it's for everyone that's tuning in. I just want to make this very clear. We are the microcosm of the macrocosm. So what that means is all the elements we see externally, they exist inside of us, right? We are made of all the elements.
Yes.
So if we want to bring more of the fire energizing element into our world, we can, yes, we can do some practices where we go out to meet the fire element in our external world, which will be
Yeah.
supportive. But in my opinion, what is more powerful is igniting that element inside of you, right? So what
Mm.
I we probably don't have time to talk about this today, but I there's a sacred space inside of your heart that I guide people to, that is called your heart temple, right? And
Wow.
in that heart temple, there are altars for each of the elements, right? For fire, earth, air, and water. So what you can do in a meditation is you can intentionally enter your heart temple and go to each of the altars, right? I usually do all four of them, but let's say you want more fire in your life. You can visualize connecting to your heart temple, see the altar of fire, and activate the bonfire, activate the lamp, activate the light
Wow.
of the fire. And this ignites your fire element, right? So it's very simple, but if you make this a practice, connecting to this temple, connecting to the elements, you'll see it come from within you.
This just was a beautiful invitation for me to go. Right now, it's actually storming. I don't know if you can hear the thunder. Like, it's massive, loud thunder that's just shaking. I love it. The elements are with us now as we talk about it. And this is a beautiful invitation for those that really feel a deeper practice to go inwards. I want to promote that so much, that it's not just about like externalizing the power of the external elements, but just a beautiful invitation, like you mentioned. And I didn't know that was a thing. So this is gold right here. And yeah, so filling yourself with the elements can look like, what I've also learned is certain practices. For example, if you're looking to fill yourself with fire, it's like exercise. It's what can you do that, like, certain breathwork techniques that like fill you with like the elements of fire. And I'm still learning so much about that, but it's like different self-love practices that really get to inspire so much. The best word that comes to me is like ancientness, because there's many practices that we're just getting to know on the surface that really stem back from our ancestors, that it's incredible. Ah, I'm feeling into anything else that wants to come through. Let me know if you have anything that's coming to your heart as well.
I'm feeling pretty good, Paula. I think we've taken the
We've
listeners on a
talked about
beautiful
so
self-love
much.
journey today. Yeah. And I mean, let's sprinkle this in, and then I'll throw it back to you.
Absolutely.
One of one of the other really powerful practices in this sort of awakening of the love consciousness, and we did this also before we started this podcast. You facilitated a meditation, and part of that meditation was connecting to the non-physical around us, the our guides, our ancestors, our angels. And this is something that, has been really a big part of my awakening experience, and the realization and the remembering that I've never been alone, right? Maybe physically from time to time, I'm separated in the 3D from people that I care about. But in any given moment, and this is really what I want to highlight, through our heart, we can invite in the non physical to love on us, right? Not even just give us specific guidance, because that's a part of it too, but just to feel loved, right? Just to feel connected to the consciousness of love, right? And I'll give an example of this in a story that I've experienced. I I connect to angels currently, but as a boy and a young man, that was very that was very foreign to me, because again, I grew up religious, so I saw angels
Yes.
as something I needed to sacrifice myself to and that I was unworthy of. So I never really stepped into that until the process that I'm in now. So fast forward to last year, I had a very profound experience of inviting in an angel for the first time, and it wasn't like I saw this being in gowns come down from the heavens with a
A
halo
halo.
over their head, and it was none of that. It was actually I was dropping into my heart, and the best way that I can explain it is my heart exploded. Right, my heart exploded with love to such a degree that I was lost in a beautiful way in the energy of the angel that was coming in, right? And I had some other visions come through, but I just shared that story to highlight that one of the deepest practices of love that you can start to cultivate on a daily basis is connecting to the non-physical spiritual entities that are around you all the time, right? And in my experience, they they respect free will. So the reason they haven't interacted with you up to this moment is because you haven't stepped in and asked for it, right? You haven't remembered
Wow.
that you are worthy to ask for help. You are worthy to receive their love because the love that they share is the same love that is in your heart.
So good. I completely love this. There's so much I want to touch on, but to be really concise, I feel like a lot of people, when they hear angels, they very much have a similar perception on what that is, as well as like, oh, they don't really tend to like understand what that really is. But they're just different beings that are here to help us on our journey and that are just really our support system. And it's something to really reframe the thought of coming from, oh, they're just, we just have to sacrifice so much. There's just so much that we don't feel like we deserve from being helped from externally in the sense of like energetic beings. And this is another beautiful invitation to remember that we're never alone. And when we say that, we shouldn't feel afraid, because when people say like, "Oh, we're not alone in this universe," I feel like that's a very exciting and curious thing to take participate participation in, and to realize that like it's a good thing that we're not alone, because it means that we're a giant community, we're a galactic community where we
Yeah,
get to co-create together and
yeah,
really create. Especially in these times, it's so important to create a positive impact
yeah,
instead of coming from a place of how we've seen the world operate from a place of like, you already know the
yeah,
systems that just try to drain our power and take our power away. Now it's like we have to make the choice to bring our power back to ourselves.
yeah,
And what it's going to take is for us to choose every single day, every single moment, who we want to be, how we want to create an impact on our community, and how we're going to do it, and be able to be practical. That's a big word for me these
yeah,
days, because as an air sign, I can get lost in the ethers sometimes and forget that I am this beautiful,
yeah,
like t- terrestrial, just terrain, earthly being.
yeah,
And it's so important to be anchored in how can we make this practical? What steps do we have to take?
yeah,
And how are we going to do it? And who do we have to ask for help?
yeah,
It's like a beautiful friend of mine said, we're not meant to be solo beings, like one single being. We're here on this planet to be one of the planet. And that means we
yeah,
have to all work together.
yeah,
And I want to leave this for the viewers to just remember that if you feel alone, you're not alone. You just have to take the blinders off and just realize there's people there to help you, that just want to help you, that actually have the space to support you in whatever you need support in. So,
I
beautiful.
want to. Can I with what you're
Yes.
saying here with that loneliness, just to wrap up, I want to read you a quote that connects to what you're saying.
Oh, beautiful.
Um, and it's from the Course in Miracles, right? And the Course in Miracles, if anyone has not looked into it, it's beautiful, beautiful resource for all awakening souls that really want to connect back to love in general. And the quote is, hang on, let me get it up. Is
Okay.
there it is there. Nothing. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God, or the peace of divine, or the peace of divine love. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And in many ways, what that quote is saying is all of the consciousness of separation that you just outlined, right? I am separate from entities, I'm separate from that person, or all the consciousness of fear that we have talked about today in all the many ways. It does not exist. It is unreal, right? When we've all moved through it, right? What have we come back to an experience of? We've come back to an experience of, oh, why was I in that for so long? Why did that take me away for so long in the way that it did? It's because it was always an illusion. So what we can start to do in those moments is not bypass, right? Not pretend that that's not there, but so we can feel the feeling and move through the limitation, remind ourselves that this isn't the deepest reality, that this fear that I'm in, this separation that I'm in, this isolation that I'm in, this pain that I'm in, this isn't the deepest reality. The deepest reality is one of unity and one of love.
Closing it out like a champ. And that, ladies and gentlemen, and beautiful beings, we're going to close off this beautiful podcast. And may this medicine serve you well on your journey. And that whatever keys that you're able to take here will be able to guide you in whatever you need guidance in. And I'll leave all of Harrison's information in the show notes so that way you can find him and be able to work with him as well. And yeah, keep up with what we're doing. We may do another one of these just because there's so much to talk about and there's like so much time that we get to dedicate to. And for today, our time has capped. Thank you so much for being here and for reaching this end of the podcast. And may you all be blessed and come from a space of love and lead from love. Thank you so much.